Hello and welcome everyone to Defining Recovery. This is a web class collaboration with me, Ben Thompson, and my colleague, Julian Cowan Hill. I'm an audiologist in California and founder of Pure Tinnitus. Julian, would you like to introduce yourself before we start?
Yeah, my name is Julian Cowan Hill. I am a psychotherapist based in London. I also do a lot of cranial sacral therapy, and I'm a tinnitus consultant. And I'm the author of a book, Tinnitus from Tyrant to Friends. I've done quite a lot of work with people with tinnitus over the last 20 years. So the question, can we regain silence once we've had tinnitus? For those of you who don't know, I had tinnitus for 20 years very badly myself. And since 2002, I've led pretty much a tinnitus-free life. So for me personally, the answer is yes. And it is, yes, you can regain silence for certain people. But I agree with what Ben's saying is that, especially at the beginning, when you're really struggling with tinnitus, it's quite hard to orient to silence, especially when you're in that trapped, overwhelmed state that we all get into. There are definitely different stages to the recovery process. And I've written a book, Tinnitus from Tyrant to Friend. This book is all about how to let go of the ringing in your ears. And one of the things in this book, I've created this tinnitus matrix. Don't worry if you can't see it, but it's a chart that tracks how people get better. And the red level at the base here is when we are stuck and tinnitus behaves like a tyrant, and we have a mindset that says, oh my God, this is never going to go, help, I'm trapped, and it's a horrible, horrible place to be. And when we're in that horrible, stuck place, to talk about silence and how to get to silence is almost too much. It's overwhelming. And unfortunately, a lot of people get into that stuck place because they've been given negative messages and they believe that they can't get out of it. So quite often, people can struggle in that horrible place for quite a long time. And then they come across my work and suddenly they're a bit shocked and they think, what? Wait a minute, you mean there's hope? And their mind shift starts opening, their mindset starts to open up. And then they can start to consider different possibilities and start to get on the road to recovery. So if you're in this level, stuck, where tinnitus is a tyrant, silence can be a bit sort of overwhelming. But once you start working your way up to level 3, where tinnitus is like a doctor, and you're starting to learn what makes it better, what makes it worse, and you have quite a clear understanding of these things, you start to see that actually tinnitus is quite a reactive, responsive symptom that can change depending on how we are in ourselves, what we do with our central nervous system, and how we feel and relate to this condition that's in our lives. Once you make progress and you get over this line, tinnitus becomes much more like a friend. So this line represents a different relationship. When you're over the line, you know you can get better. It all starts to make sense. You know really what helps you. You've got hopefully a good support network set up around you. You know how to self-soothe, you know how to really calm your nervous system down. So once you're getting up to these levels, orienting to silence is actually much easier. It makes much more sense. And you start to have a very clear sense of, yeah, this is possible. And often you start experiencing periods of very low level tinnitus. So you start coming down to 1s or 2s out of 10. When 10's terrible, 0 is silent. When you start hitting 1s or 0.5s, and you have occasional glimpses of silence, those are real landmarks. And in my experience, having the right relationship with tinnitus, having the right approach, knowing how to settle your system, how to focus on other things, it's possible to drop more and more into states of quiet. So, it is a journey. And when I work with people, it depends very much where they are on the path to recovery, with the kind of language I use and what we are aiming for, because it definitely changes as you get better. So the first piece of I'm going to talk about some of the things we really need to get in place, which I believe we need to have there in order to make a good recovery. And the first thing, which ties in very much with what Ben was saying, is to sort out the audiological things. You need to stop fiddling around with your ears. So go and see a specialist, have your ears tested, make sure your ears are functioning as well as they can. For somebody with hearing loss like me, you may want to get a hearing aid. There may be quite simple things like a lot of wax buildup. There may be various other issues that it's really good to get your ears sorted, checked out, so that they can get onto an even keel. They can start to settle. And so you can start to get used to the way your ears are. If you've gone through a sudden hearing loss, it really changes your world, and it can take months before you start to normalize and get your bearings. But once it's settled, then you want to leave your hearing alone. You want to be able to stop fiddling around, and you want to be able to stop focusing on your ears. Part of making a really good recovery is to shift your focus away from your hearing once they're in as good a place as they can be, and you get on with your life, and you help your nervous system settle, and your hearing sensitivity hopefully can settle right down. And in the background, your ears start to normalize and reset themselves. If you're worrying about tinnitus, you know what it's like. You're focusing on your hearing, you're hypervigilant, and you're kind of reactivating your hearing just by hanging out in your auditory processes the whole time. And you end up turning into a gigantic like radar, sensing the environment and reacting to your ears. That keeps it inflamed, it keeps it up and running. What you want is to leave your hearing alone once you've had it sorted by audiologists and doctors and people like that. So you can stop fiddling and leave it alone so it can settle. The next most important thing is to open your mindset to change. There are so many negative messages about tinnitus out there. Unfortunately, health practitioners come out with real humdingers, real bombshells of negativity. I'm not going to share them here because they're quite sort of shocking, but a lot of people are exposed to very negative beliefs about tinnitus, which unfortunately are very infectious, and they make you if you believe them, oh my God, will this ever go? It can really put you into this activated fight or flight state of hearing. So if you go and see somebody in a position of authority for help, and they turn around and say, sorry, nothing I can do, learn to live with it, bye. It's like being pushed off a cliff, and it's really horrible. We need to be very careful of negative messages. When people say there's no cure, they're often working within the medical model, and medics haven't come up with a pill that cures tinnitus yet. They're working on it. There isn't an operation to do anything specific that stops tinnitus yet, but I'm sure that will happen with time. It's inevitably they're going to come up with these cures, but if there's no cure in the medical model, it doesn't mean that you can't get better. Ear, nose, and throat specialists are surgeons. They're not therapists. They're not trained therapists. They're not trained to deal with your suffering for an hour a week, every week for months and years, like psychotherapists are. We learn to hang out with people suffering and help people through difficulty. And body-based therapists, we have a practice that helps your nervous system switch off and settle. So all the body-based therapists, from chiropractors, reflexologists, cranial sacral therapists like me, all body-based therapists can relax your nervous system down, bring you into balance, and they can really help make a massive difference to your nervous system and how your auditory system's functioning. The face, jaw, ear, neck area is directly linked to tinnitus. If you clench your teeth, push your jaw in, or if you're very tight, that directly changes the tune. So if you free up the physical structures with really good body work, it can really bring the reactivity of tinnitus down. If you think of tinnitus as irritability in your auditory system, anything that brings the irritability down in your face, jaw, neck area has an immediate knock-on effect. So something as simple as yawning, you can hear the eustachian tube popping and the little auditory muscles quivering. It's a natural way of freeing up the ear, nose, and throat system. So to get into regular habits of facial massages and yawning, having serious yawn fests every evening actually have quite a big impact on your tinnitus. So opening the mind to change, please stay away from negativity. Please stay away from the internet. If you go on the internet, you'll see the clumps of doom and gloom and stress and suffering of just the people who are struggling. That's quite a small group of people, because the huge group of people that get tinnitus and then move on and make a good recovery, they don't go online anymore. So, the internet is actually really unhelpful when it comes for tinnitus in many ways. For me, one of the main things that help tinnitus is to come out of fight or flight. So with tinnitus, the classic tinnitus person, the focus is up and out, and the system is activated. The mind catastrophizes, the body goes tense, and the hearing is listening out for danger. So this radar-like or listening system really needs to feel safe before it switches off and settles. So for me, I had very, very bad symptoms, and cranial sacral therapy had a huge effect on me because it was the first time in my life that I actually had very gentle but careful work on my body, which helped switch off my fight or flight response. When I had bad tinnitus, I was walking around in this very reactive fight or flight and freeze response. Freeze is like overwhelmed, spaced out, numb, can't cope. I used to live in between fight or flight and freeze the whole time. And cranial sacral therapy, thank God I found it, it helped bring me back to a state of well-being and calm. And over a period of time, probably took me about a year to really switch off. And when it was during my training program as a therapist, I was about 6 months into that training program, that I woke up and had my first morning of silence. It was about a week of silence. And having had it for 20 years, it was quite a big shock that that was possible. So, of course, it is possible for some people, but we don't want to raise expectations too far too quickly at the beginning. I think just pacing yourself, working your way along the path, and then silence becomes much more realistic, practical, and you can start to glimpse it, and then you start to get longer and longer periods of silence. But it's definitely a journey to get there. So coming out of fight or flight freeze response, for me, is just so helpful in helping people with tinnitus. So I encourage you to find a really good body-based therapist that can help you, and to learn yoga and Tai Chi, these practices that can shift us from that mental blah, 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 oh my God, blah, 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 the accelerated catastrophic thinking and tense body. into, after an hour of yoga or Tai Chi, you just have that sense of landing, settled in, the mind stopped racing, breathing slowed down, body's warmed up, freed up, warm hands and feet, and everything just feels more grounded, calm, and settled. And the more at home we are inside our skin bag, so to speak, the more the senses stop being hypervigilant. They stop listening out for danger. So visual snow is when people are overseeing and they see all the stuff, buzzing vision or floaters in the air. It's just like tinnitus, you're overhearing. You're hearing the buzz of the brain, this boring, irrelevant background buzz that's there all the time, but the brain is now sensing and monitoring because of the fight or flight response. So that's a huge piece of the puzzle. The next thing is to move into acceptance. At the beginning, when tinnitus is difficult, it's really hard to accept. I couldn't, if somebody said learn to live with it, or when the ENT said learn to live with it, I just could not believe it. And I was horrified, and it actually made me really depressed. So if you're suffering from bad symptoms, it's really hard to accept it at the beginning. And at the beginning, it's very much about setting up support practices and starting to learn to let go, de-stress, and settle. As it starts getting better, and as the noise starts piping down, and as you start to get a clear idea of what makes it better and worse, then acceptance becomes much more possible. And so ideally, you want to let the tinnitus be here. It is here just now. The just now bit really helps. The tinnitus is here just now. With it here, what can I do to be okay? What can I do to help my system feel comfortable and at ease? Because the more we can just be with it in a comfortable, accepting way, the more the resistance comes down, and the more tinnitus can just kind of back off. It can ease off. The intensity can quieten down. Part of accepting tinnitus is dealing with our fear. And in many countries at the moment, cognitive behavioral therapy is really mainstream and very helpful, because you meet your fears again and again. You look at the way you think about things, you look at your relationship with tinnitus, and the more you meet your fears, the more they start to subside. If we run away from our fears, they can seem bigger and loom larger. But when we actually see it for what it is, and we learn to just settle, we learn to weather the storms and just be with it, actually our fear comes down, and it can start to become more manageable. And tinnitus can start to turn into a healthometer. Once you get up to level 6 or 7, where tinnitus becomes like a friend, by the time you're at this level, it's probably quite a lot quieter. You've got a much better relationship with it. And tinnitus is literally just a healthometer. If you have a bad night's sleep, it gets worse. If you get a terrible stinking cold, it gets worse. If you get a horrible ear infection, it gets worse. If you go to a loud concert, it gets worse. But if you look after yourself, and you know how to self-soothe, and you know how to calm your system down, and you've got a really good lifestyle and routine and practice, so your whole nervous system becomes much more grounded and steady, and you know that helps your tinnitus get better, then actually it's not threatening anymore. If my tinnitus comes back, I got an ear infection last year from swimming in the sea a lot. The first response was, oh, thank you, tinnitus. Yeah, I need to look after my ear. I'll go and get it sorted. I knew it would go away again. I absolutely had no doubt in my mind. And I thought, well, this will probably take a week or two. I had low-level tinnitus, but I started to go back into the facial massages, the yawning. I do yoga regularly anyway, but I just stepped up my self-care, and I took medicine for my ear, looked after the, it's really important to, with any ear infections, to take good care of your ears so that they can settle. And then it just backed off quite readily. So acceptance is a really big piece. When habituation, it happens when people have accepted it. It's here. Oh, just the same old thing. Who cares? So what? I'm just going to get on with my day. Moving into so what? Who cares? People then start to habituate, and their resistance comes down, and that causes a fight or flight response to come down. And that generally, when people habituate, tinnitus gets a little bit better. So I always think it's a nice bottom line. I quite often say to people, the worst case scenario is if you don't do anything about this, eventually you're just going to get really fed up with it and think, oh, what the hell? And you just move on with your life, and you start to habituate. And when you habituate, it often gets a bit better. That's quite, as a bottom line, I think that's quite an encouraging one. Once you're well on your way with tinnitus, once you've learned to self-soothe and you become more grounded, you got your practices, you can help calm your nervous system down, you're taking good care of yourself. I think the next really important ingredient is to be a little bit passive about your hearing. You're not actively listening out. You can learn to just sit back and let the auditory world come back to you. You want to leave your ears alone, let them potter along in the background, and just get on with other things. Wherever possible, the way to do this is to normalize your life. So you getting on with the things you love doing, meeting up with your friends, having dinner together, doing your paintings or following your passions. When you're thoroughly enjoying yourself and thoroughly absorbed in activities or interacting with people, guess what? You forget about your ears. You're going to be much more interested in what you're doing or listening to what they're saying. And that helps focus your hearing, and it helps bring you out of that scattered, listen to anything, radar-like hearing into much calmer, focused hearing, where you can switch on and then switch off. So normalizing your life, not giving tinnitus any power. You don't want it to be center stage. You don't want it to boss you around. You want to put your well-being in the center of the stage so that you can get on, settle, forget about it. And when you get into that phase of forgetting about it, it can be a journey to get to that phase. But when you get to the place where it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, gosh, where's my tinnitus? I haven't thought about it all day. Oh, there it is. Well, it sounds really quiet. If you go have long periods of time where you're just not thinking about it and you forget about it, it really starts to pipe down. So towards the end, when you're down to 0.5s out of 10, ones, really low level tinnitus, tinnitus can be a little bit of a habit. So you only notice it when you focus on it. But if you're not focusing on it, you don't really hear it. So people can just, being outside, going to work, going about their daily busy life, they don't think about it or hear it. That's a really interesting place to be, because you start to see that you're almost creating your tinnitus by checking up on it. And you enter that strange gray area where, do I have tinnitus or not? If I focus on it, it seems to appear, but I'm sure before I focused on it, I didn't hear anything. That's very strange hinterland, like that Heller and Bergman experiment, those guys who are left in front of a speaker and they were asked to write down any noise that they heard because they were straining to hear sounds and, oh, like in a high-pitched squeak. They only heard tinnitus because they were straining to hear in silence, and they ended up sensitizing themselves so much that they could hear the buzz of their brain. But nobody told them about tinnitus. They left the experiment, walked away, probably never thought about it again, probably never heard of tinnitus. And so their hearing would have just normalized, it would have equalized and reset itself to silence. So it is possible to hear silence. It's not a miracle. It's not like climbing Mount Everest. There is a journey to get there, but regularly I have clients, once they've kind of learned a lot more about tinnitus and they've learned how to help themselves settle, very commonly they come in and say, well, last weekend I had zeros all weekend and then came back a bit on Monday, but most of the week it was hovering around a 2 or a 3, but I had like a couple more zeros on Thursday and Friday. That's very common in my practice. And I think to get to that level, it really helps to have body work. Cranial sacral therapy, for example, for me, is one of the best. I'm bound to say that. I'm really biased because it saved my life. If you have a cranial contact and you're lying on a couch, you can feel yourself dropping into stillness. And all the Twitter stops and the body just goes very calm and still. And I can honestly say, I really doubt I'd ever would have experienced stillness had I not had cranial work. Feeling your body just going very, very calm. You're not awake, you're not asleep, but you're just in that very neutral, calm, peaceful state. It's just incredibly helpful. And things like learning how to meditate. So you're learning to follow the breath, you stay with the breath, so you stop being hijacked by thinking. That's so helpful because thinking, catastrophic thinking, keeps you in that stress loop. So when these thoughts pass through your head like, oh my God, well, this is never going to go, you can just take a breath. Come back to a grounded, calm body, or have a cold shower, or do your yoga practices. There's so many things that can help just reconnect with the groundedness of the body. So the blah, blah, blah in your head, or the theater of fear that's erupting on the stage, you don't get pulled into it. The reason we meditate is to stop being hijacked by thinking. Thinking is one of the problems with tinnitus. We don't want to pay too much attention to the thinking or to the hearing. We want to just drop into a calm, neutral state. That's why a slow walking meditation is one of my favorite practices, where you walk incredibly slowly in a circle for 10, 15 minutes. The slow movement means that you have to balance and pay a lot of attention to your lower half of the body. And you feel the feet on the ground and the feet on the ground, and you just keep going. And your head will go, but the slow movement will just bring you downstairs into this very simple, steady, calming practice of feeling your feet on the ground. Or if you have a reflexology session, a whole hour of heavenly foot massage. It's just bliss having your feet massaged for 1 hour. And for tinnitus people, it's a no-brainer. It's a whole hour of refocusing strongly at the opposite end of your body. It's just really, really brilliant. And finally, with all these practices, all these things that help you settle, soothe, relax, from yawning and facial massages every evening to having a lovely cranial sacral therapy session, etc., meditation. What happens as you get better is that your brain refreshes itself and sets up new neural pathways. Neuroplasticity is a real thing. Brains are constantly refreshing themselves anew, so that you create new patterns, new relationships, so that tinnitus not only can quieten down, but it can seem like a distant memory or some kind of strange chapter when you look back at it. I even have had clients who grieve the loss of tinnitus, and it takes them a while when they go into silence. It's like something's missing. I mean, it's so it really can happen. I hope that's giving you sort of quite a broad brush approach of some of the ways that can really get you a long way on your journey to recovery. My advice about silence is, first of all, aim for well-being, aim for your hearing to soften and to settle and to ease off first. And then as you get much better, once you've got very clear, solid senses of what makes you quieter, this is good for me, this is bad for me. Once you're really clearly in that camp, then you can aim for quietening down to silence. In my app called Quieten, as in quieten down, that's Quieten, that there are lots of techniques and practices about how to help you depending on what stage you're at, because as you get along the journey, further along the path, you will need different things, and there'll be different approaches that help you let go of this condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. That was wonderful. I'm going to share my screen here just to show us our contact information. As this was the end of this web class, we're about to transition into the question and answer session. But first of all, thank you for anyone who's watched, anyone who's with here live. If you wanted to find Julian, here's his contact information. If you wanted to find me, here's my contact information. Julian, you had mentioned your book and your app and your website. Do you want to give a concise way that people can find you?
Yes. So yeah, my book is called Tinnitus from Tyrant to Friend. I don't know if you can see that. And you can get that on Amazon. It's Tinnitus from Tyrant to Friend, How to Let Go of Ringing in Your Ears. And my app, if you go to the App Store or Google Play, it's just called Quieten. Tinnitus relief, Quieten. And yeah, there's a lot of practice and techniques on there, lots of talks there, lots of question and answer things. Can I fly? Can I go on holiday with tinnitus? To how to go into a silent room with tinnitus. There's all sorts of answers to people's common questions that I've collected from my clinical practice over the last 20 years.
Thank you so much. And for me, Ben Thompson, you can find me at puretinnitus.com. I write a lot of blog articles, which go on my website. Also, I'm on YouTube, Ben Thompson, AUD, Pure Tinnitus. I have one-on-one consultation with individuals wherever you are. I also have a group coaching program teaching some of these techniques, meeting every month in a group setting with ongoing admissions. So that's where you can find us. Now we're going to transition into the question and answer session. Thank you, guys.